And so a lot of the mechanics and things that are taught in other modalities, energy healing modalities, you find a foundation for these from Astara that was presented back in 1951. And so, you know, part of my process was, you know, interaction with that, becoming an Arhat and you know, the practices of being with the medicine man, and then also in the Buddhist tradition, considered a representative in the West. I actually have been presented with a bone apron from a Llama in the Nyingma tradition that's tied to inner transmissions. And so, you know, as time goes by, I will pass it on to somebody else, but the apron is about 400 years old. And it's usually given from teacher to student. And it's usually normally worn by somebody that's a head of a temple. But here I'm a representative in the West. And so I'm wearing it as a representative of Astara. And, you know, all of this kind of ties together with the things that were put in motion by Holy Master Choa Kok Sui. Even the direction of my interaction with the Nyingma tradition was guided by that teacher.
Can you just elaborate on how Llama Yoga is similar to Dhyan?
Yeah, it's almost identical, actually. The difference is that Llama Yoga is still doing the breath, where you put your chin down and then raise your head up. You know, we don't do as many cycles, and in the beginning we don't really use a mudra, but we basically do the same practice, and we use it for meditation. We use it for actually healing as well. And you know, if you look at the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda, there's a very interesting thing. You know, there's a part in his book Autobiography of a Yogi where he talks about the breath, and that the inhalation needs to be surrendered to the exhalation, and the exhalation needs to be surrendered to the inhalation, right? And without this surrendering of the inhalation to the exhalation and the exhalation to the inhalation, one cannot experience the higher soul. And if you look at the instructions are basically what we would call Llama Yoga or sustained awareness, Zen in the East, Dhyana or Dhyan. And so there is the mechanical components of this that are pretty much identical, but the intention behind it, there's a little bit more depth with the things that we teach in Astara, with how to utilize that, when to utilize it, and the intention of going into that meditation. And, you know, a lot of that is the play of the forehead and the back head and the things with the spine. And so mechanically, these things are explained. And when you understand these components, you can actually accelerate your meditation process and actually deepen the psychological healing that can come from doing that meditation.
Okay, wow. And the word Arhat, can we go back to trace the point at which it has come into general usage, and how the path to becoming an Arhat has actually been helped by the teachings of Holy Master Kuthumi and the various teachings channelized by the various other holy masters like DK, through Alice Bailey and many of them, and through Erlene Cheney, through the Astara teachings?
Yeah, so the term Arhat, as you guys know, is the disciples that were around the Buddha, right? And so, you know, you could say a lot of different ways. You could explain that in a lot of different ways, like somebody who's developing, somebody who's becoming more aware of the inner light. You know, and even when becoming aware of the light, there's different levels or degrees of awareness of light, and there's different kinds of light, right? And so with Astara, we go through and we mechanically look at not just the energy component, but we also look at some of the physiology. Because when you're doing some of these practices, we have the energy body, we have the emotions, we have the mind, and the emotions and mind are very conductive to the soul, right? They're very, very conductive to the soul. The body, not so much. Right? The body is actually naturally kind of resistant to the soul. But this dance between the higher and the lower is how we spiritually grow and evolve. Like the way that we temper ourselves and apply ourselves because of this resistance of the physiology, it is part of how we are able to accelerate our development if we do it with awareness and with attention. And so when we go through and we look at these things from the point of view of the Astara and the Astara teachings, is we look at this integration of the mind, the emotions, the body, the energy body, and the levels of awareness that are, even as we develop, what are we tapping into, right? And so when you really are able to stop wrestling with the lower component, wrestling with the physiology or your lower nature, and you make it an ally, like you are able to temper it in a particular way that is, you could say it's a spiritual practice, but you could also say it's tied to alchemical practices, which are woven within the teachings of Astara, where you take something that's in the form, which here we're talking about the body, or the mind, the processes of the mind, the thought processes, the views, the things that we have, and we apply these alchemical processes and these spiritual practices to this practice. The rate of development becomes substantial, because really what you're starting to do is you're starting to look at the idea of yin and yang. You know, you're looking at the play of form and essence, right? So yang being the essence, yin being the form. And if you look at all the energy centers within the body, all the energy centers are yang except for the basic chakra, which is yin, right? And so all of these are tied to expansion, they're tied to essence, and we're trying to get that essence into the form. And as we get it into the form, we start to have more soul energy in the body, but we're beginning to wake up the Kundalini energy. We're beginning to wake up that sacred fire. And our development is not how much energy goes down, it's actually how much energy goes back up. So the more that we can get the essence into the form, the more that we will accelerate our spiritual growth. You could say that a lot of different ways. You could just say awakening Kundalini, but what does that even mean? You could say sacred fire, but what does that mean? There is physiological processes, there is energetic processes that are tied to this. And so the more that you look at this, you can gain better understanding through the look at the yin and yang aspect. And so when you look at yin yang, basically whatever, you know, these two pieces are polarized, and whatever you tend to focus on, or whenever you become extreme in one, it produces the opposite, right? So if you have a lot of negative thinking, you begin, that is the essence, and you begin to produce the form that is associated with the negative thinking. Like if you're really grinding on somebody, it becomes more and more essence, and then you produce the form that is either the thought process, or it manifests in your physical body, right? It manifests in your physiology. Then if you're thinking about something very positive, you're thinking about something spiritual, you're generating that essence that then produces the result in the physical form, excuse me, in the physical form that you could say upgrades the form, upgrades the mind, upgrades the viewpoints, upgrades your physiology. And so this is really the foundation also of alchemy, is you would focus on the form to produce the desired essence. And then as you're able to experience the essence, then you're starting to evolve the form, right? Instead of wrestling with it, you want to go through and evolve your body. You want to evolve your physiology. You want to evolve your mind, right? You're not wanting to change it. You want to kind of wake up where it's at and then evolve it through infusing it with this light or this essence. And if you boil down what is Astara, Astara is the teachings of divine light. And if you take a step back and go, well, even what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? That's just like fancy words, that's spiritual words, but what does that mean, right? And so if you look at the three different kinds of spiritual energy, right? We have creative destruction, right? So we're basically removing something to make space for something to come in. It's a deep type of purification, right? You're literally removing something within you so more soul energy can be present, right? Then we go to the divine love aspect. And the divine love aspect is really, you could say, divine providence, right? Is the stabilizing factor. You know, you're experiencing love, you're experiencing a sense of well-being, but it is the component that stabilizes things in the life. You know, be it your mind, your emotions, your body, your prosperity, whatever it is, divine love is providence, right? Divine providence. Now, what we really try to strive for is to be in that place of divine providence, you know, in that place where everything's stable, everything's good, we're provided for, things are happening, we're able to attract things into our life, we're able to have manifestation, but how do we get there, right? And so, excuse me. Then you look at the divine light aspect or divine intelligence. Divine light or divine intelligence is based on cycles, right? It's based on cycles. And so the cycles are like, even if you look at the day, the sun is up and then it's nighttime. The stores are open, the stores are closed, right? You're awake and then you're asleep. All of these are cycles. And so when you are doing a particular practice, you're harnessing the law of cycles. Like if you pay attention to yourself and you have self-awareness, you go, okay, some days I feel good, and then I have these certain struggles that come up. I have this certain kind of thinking. My relationships, I have these certain kind of arguments in these different relationships, or I have these issues. They're good, and then it comes up. Like I might have an argument with my partner and then it goes away for a couple of weeks, and then I have that same argument again and then it goes away, right? This is all a negative form of cycles, right? If we don't pay attention to that, it starts just spiraling downward, right? So when you put a practice in place, when you do meditation on a regular basis, when you do purification, when you do energy healing, you're setting a schedule to go through and do this so that as these things come up, the meditation kind of knocks it down, the healing knocks it down, the purification knocks it down. So you're literally harnessing light to diminish the ignorance or the difficulties that come up with our normal everyday lives, the resistance to the soul. And so as you harness this divine intelligence or this divine light, it produces providence. It produces divine love, right? And so without really being aware of the light and harnessing the light and harnessing the law of cycles, then that aspect of divine providence becomes very difficult to access. It can be done, it's just hard because you kind of fumble through everything to get to that place. But if you harness light, you're able to produce providence. And from the place of providence, that is the place where you engage creative destruction. You do it from a place of stability, not a place of chaos, right? And so Astara is basically the science of light. It is the science of harnessing the light to produce providence, then to produce the next step, which would be creative destruction. And the focus on Astara is really getting the mechanics down of divine intelligence or the light aspect. Because without the light, it's just all empty mechanical practices. You really need to have the light to come in for the other processes to happen. So the focus of Astara is to focus on the light.
One more thing. Yeah. We would actually want to know where Astara has actually like started off from and how old it is, and a little bit about the lineage of the masters that are associated with this teaching.
Sure.
How it is
So-
related to Arhat Yoga?
What's that?
How is it related to Arhat Yoga directly?
So the founding of Astara was in 1951. The teachings were given to Erlane Cheney by Master Kutumi, Holy Master Kutumi, who in different incarnations, you could say different things, but Master Kutumi also is the being that you would also know as Saint Francis of Assisi. And, you know, if you are familiar with the meditation on Twin Hearts, in Twin Hearts, the prayer of Saint Francis of Assisi is used. That is actually the being that we would also call Kutumi.
Okay,
Kutumi was also...
Kutumi is Saint Francis of Assisi. Okay,
Correct.
yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you know, there is the talk that, you know, the three wise men that presented themselves to the Christ or the Krishna, they were basically Moria, Kutumi, and Choa Kok. And so you could say that the lineage of Kutumi goes back very far of preparing the world for basically meditation or sadhana. And I would also say that Kutumi is very tied to alchemical practices. And so even when you look at the practices of becoming an Arhat, you know, we look at them from the point of view as meditation, but as you go through the levels of becoming an Arhat, and you go to level 1, level 2, level 3, those are also alchemical processes. And you know, alchemical processes are turning lead to gold in theory. It's not necessarily physical gold, it is the golden body. And you know, the lead being the dirty energy or the lower vibrational energy, but also it is the practice of using the form to produce the essence. Just like we were talking about yin and yang before, is by going through and doing these practices with intention and following techniques, by focusing on certain forms, you're able to produce an essence that directly corresponds to this, right? So even the idea of using a statue, even using a thangka or a painting, even the devotion to a teacher or guru is focusing on the form to then produce a certain essence. So the more devoted you are to a guru, the more devoted you are, and you have a devotional practice with a statue of a particular deity or a thangka or a painting of a particular deity, these produce an essence that helps to rapidly help you to spiritually grow and evolve. And as you go through and you do these meditation practices to become Arhat, there are the mechanical components that do this. But without devotion to the teacher, devotion to the guru, devotion to the deity, they don't have a lot of oomph to them, right? You need the devotional component, you need the light component, you know, you need the love component. And so as you go through and you do these practices of becoming an Arhat, you know, it is a stimulated practice. You're stimulating the energy centers, hoping to one day kind of wake up in it, right? You're stimulating the energy body so that you can kind of step into it at some point. You could say Astara is the flip side of it. It's a bit more of a mystical practice. It's a bit more of an alchemical practice. It is literally helping you to like wake up in the practice, right? So as you go through and you do your different meditations, it helps bring greater awareness and greater levels of presence as you go through and you do these meditations, which produces a much deeper effect, a much deeper result.
So we have a mention about Bardo. in the Astara.
Oh, yes.
Can you just elaborate that? How is it related to our end of life?
Yes, so you could say, so the Bardo is tied to the time when we are making a transition from being in a physical body to not being in a body. And, there are certain levels of steps or awareness that happen as you go through this process. And really the potential for greater spiritual development happens at that time of passing, right? And so the more that you are aware of this process, the more you kind of prepare for it, which is a big thing for Astara. We really look at the aspect of the dying process, what happens before, what happens during, and what happens after, to say that this is kind of one of the most important things that can happen to a person. And if you harness it properly, your level of your potential for spiritual development is quite substantial in this period. And if you don't really embrace the light that's coming in at this particular time, it is a missed opportunity, right? And so we spend our lives doing these practices to kind of prepare for the next step, the next phase. The Bardo can help somebody who is in the process of passing to embrace this light and to step into the next realm or the next, series of events. It also helps to prepare ourselves for the process of going into the dying process and even after the fact. You could say meditation is doing some of these processes as well, but the Bardo is really about harnessing that potential that happens at the time of transition. And you don't really end when your body falls away. You could almost say your awareness becomes much broader, it becomes much greater. You could say you're even more alive at that time without the body. Like when Holy Master Choa Kok Sui left the body, I have this very interesting experience with this. Holy Master would come through and we'd see him, and it was obviously his body wasn't feeling good. And we saw him at the senior retreat, and these things were happening. And then it came time close to the time where he was passing. And I was actually teaching that weekend. I was teaching energy healing. And for the month or so before, I kept thinking, maybe this is my time. I'm passing. Maybe, this is going to be my transition. I don't know what's going to happen, but I felt like I was going to pass. It was always on my mind. And so I was going around saying to people, I love you. I was grateful for all the time that I had with you. All these things were happening. And then as I was teaching that weekend, people kept saying to me, are you okay? You look really sad. And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. Nothing's going on. I don't know what that is. And as soon as I was done teaching, I walked into another room, and there was a little couch there, and I passed out. I completely passed out. And apparently they were trying to wake me, and I was not aware of it. I was in a state where I was not aware of the body, you could say. And at one point I heard, you have to go back. And I was like, I don't want to. This is very nice. This is very blissful. I'm good here. And all of a sudden I kept hearing, you have to go back. You have to go back. You have to go back. And in that process, I eventually came back to my body, and I kind of I was shaking it off, and I woke up, and there was about 10 people all standing around me, and they were like, are you okay? Do we need to call an ambulance? What's going on? We don't know what happened. And I was like, I'm fine. I just felt like, I was tired, and it felt like a deep meditation kind of. And it turned out that it was really close to the time that Holy Master Choa Kok Sui passed away. And in that time, you could say, I could feel the falling away of the external life. And I could say I even felt the falling away of the inner life, like my thoughts and feelings about this and that. And there was just this great expansion of awareness. And there was this like broad awareness, right? There was this light that I'm not familiar with. And talking with another teacher, they said, like, that's the light that comes when somebody passes. Like, that's the light that you kind of step into as that time comes. And I was very fortunate to get to experience even a little tiny bit of that when the teacher passed. But the Bardo is about embracing that aspect, like preparing for it and the ability to embrace it. It's very similar to like what happens when you dream, but even more so, if that makes sense. And so there's mechanics that we talk about. There's little processes that we talk about, and it can be augmented with meditation and mantra and things like this. But yeah, it's
Are we
basically
likely to experience our what has happened in our life?
What's that?
Life. At that time, when you are experiencing the Bardo, is it possible or it is likely to happen that we are going to experience whatever has happened in our life?
Yes.
To judge ourselves whether what was done by us was right or wrong.
Yes. In that state, you do have your life kind of pass before you. Like you have your past experiences kind of pass through you, so that you can go through and process that. But I would say also with deep meditation, especially with like Llama Yoga and the things that we're talking about, those kinds of experiences can be happening because you're not making the physical transition, but you're starting to transition your consciousness, your awareness, right? And so with going through and doing these deeper practices with Llama Yoga and things of this nature, you can actually begin experiencing the light flashing before your eyes, or events and past experiences passing through your eyes without having to leave the body. It's because the body, you could say it like you're dying and being reborn, or you're being born again, however you want to say it. There are mechanics to that. And going back to what we were talking about before, where you're refining the form, you're passing light within the form. Anytime you're passing light through the form, you're really kind of doing a process of being like born again. Like something is dying off and then you're being born again, right? You're becoming a higher upgrade of who you are as a soul, rather than just the personality or the life.
I know you already talked to me about it, but we've had some people email us about the upcoming alchemy classes.
Oh, the Astara light technique. So the thing with that is it's combining different things from alchemical practices, meditation, things that are in Astara, and put it forth as a foundation for deepening your meditation practice. But also from that, it is going to be a practice with like angels eventually, after the foundation's laid. And a way of teaching angels is very different than anything that I've even talked about. And there's also going to be a crystal healing that is associated with this particular class that, again, is, I haven't seen anything like it. It is basically the old school way of working with stones and crystals and things of this nature, but in alchemical processes. So this first class that we'll be doing will be laying the foundation. It is a standardized thing that we're going to be teaching over and over again. And then from that, we're going to be doing work with angels, work with like what they call like deity or guru yoga.